Hello, my name is Vip Vipperman. I'm excited to be back this morning in the studio on the Back in the Bold podcast with my guest today, Brad Scoggin of Arbor. Excited to chat with Brad and hear a little bit more about what's been going on in the Arbor company over the last few years. Brad and I got connected early on in this investment ecosystem at an event or through an event, and so excited to catch back up and hear about some of the stories that have been happening in the Arbor ecosystem. Brad, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks, Vip. It's great to be here.
Yeah, bud. So I'm in Dallas, Texas. Where are you calling in from this morning?
So I'm in Orange County, but I always like to say I'm from Oklahoma. So small town Oklahoma guy who has transplanted to Orange County.
Yep, nice. Any place in particular in Oklahoma? I've spent some time Big Bend National Park and some of the fun places in Oklahoma.
Well, this is actually fun, and we didn't prepare this, but it's a very small town, and I always tell people, especially out here, people are kind of shocked. But I grew up 5 minutes from Tiger King. We're Tiger King, if you remember Tiger King. Netflix.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so the town that I grew up in, I actually am very proud of it, Pauls Valley, Oklahoma. It's known for noodling festival, where you pull catfish out of the river with your hands.
With your hand? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's 5 minutes from where the Tiger King was headquartered. So that's my origin story.
Claim to fame. That's wild. But you've mailed your way out to to California, to the West Coast. Tell us a little bit about that story. How did you get from small town Oklahoma in the backyard of Tiger King?
Yeah, that's a good little story. So I met my wife, who I guess this year will be 17 years, 18 years. But we met at OU, so in Norman, Oklahoma, and she was in medical school at the time. So we get married. She finishes medical school. I actually go to work for a nonprofit, which is kind of like the deep origin of Arbor. Actually, kind of comes out of the nonprofit space, which I think is somewhat unique. I know some of the other investments, maybe for you all, have a similar origin story, but typically that's not the path for a tech startup. But we had been in Oklahoma our whole life. Our whole married life had been residency and medical school in Oklahoma, and we were just looking for a change. And kind of on a whim, just took a leap of faith, and moved our family out to California in 2016. And so moved out, didn't know anybody. And I always tell people, it's one of the hardest things that we've done, but I think there's something there's something about the relationships and friendships you build in that setting versus just the people you grow up with, that there's just a richness there that I think that we've come to really appreciate.
That's cool. How did you guys settle into California? I mean, that is a huge difference. You're talking a small town, a couple thousand people, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
To big city, and we're talking like Orange County area.
Right. Yeah. I think that what's funny about it is I think both of us have just, an adventurous side. And so I think we like the idea of let's just jump.
Yeah.
But then once you get here and you don't know anybody, so now then you're kind of on this journey of, okay, where do we fit in? Where do we go to church? Where do we ultimately want to live? Where do we want our kids to go to school? But I think what was interesting is the longer we lived here, the more it just felt for me like home. And it almost felt like I was always supposed to be here. So sometimes, I kind of joke about how much I love California versus Oklahoma and kind of give my Oklahoma friends and family a hard time. But the truth is, my true perspective is I'm probably tainted a little bit in my view because I think it's where I'm supposed to be. And I think we're all probably going to have a love for where we're supposed to be. Right. Yeah. So I think that helped for us. I think it just felt like, this is home. And it's just been awesome to be here.
Nice. So my assumption, based on your wife and going through medical school and residency and that kind of thing, is she gets a job at a local hospital, that type of situation. And then you come from the nonprofit world. What did you start doing?
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of the backstory of the nonprofit, because it is the kind of the foundational why for Arbor. So going back, we got married I was right out of college. She was in her first year of medical school, and we're living in Oklahoma. And I got a business degree at OU, and I went straight to work at a nonprofit. And the nonprofit was doing work in Latin America and seeing some pretty incredible results at a national scale. And so imagine some of the harshest environments and seeing really a complete reformation of education. And I got to be kind of on the business side of it, so kind of building up the business side in the U.S., But what that did for me, a couple key things. Like I think when I look back at I'll be 40 in a couple weeks. So I look back at my life, think like that season was so important because it showed me that one, like systemic change is possible, and even really really hard environments. And but then two, the organization was reforming education, and that's just hard to do. It's really really hard to reform a broken system of that
Yeah.
size and magnitude. And so it put this thing in me of, okay, man, wouldn't it be cool to identify a new system before it was broken, basically, like on the front end, and be a part of helping shape it the right way from the beginning, which sounds so idealistic, right?
Yeah.
But that's the whole why. And so I had done the nonprofit thing for about 7 years. And it was the same time we moved out to California that I just felt like I'd always wanted to end up in business. And it was almost like I felt like I needed to go do this kind of stint in the nonprofit. Again, looking back, it was such a greenhouse for entrepreneurship. I mean, you got to raise money, build teams with no product. It's like it's vision and raising money, right? Which is the foundation, building teams, foundations of, yeah, exactly. And so when we moved out, you're exactly right. Like, actually, I stepped out. I had no job. My wife started at a private practice. She's a psychiatrist. And it was kind of like, okay, now I'm going to go do something in business. And I think the other thing that I took away from that time in the nonprofit for me at least, there was a lot about the structure of how nonprofits work that I did not like. And there was a lot about the way that they're judged and graded on, and it's like the way that money is spent versus outcomes. There's just stuff I didn't like. So I thought, okay, I just don't like that. I want to go do something in business. I want to do good. I want to reform something. But I think you can also make money. Like, I don't think it has to be either or. I think that your business, it doesn't have to be that you're a successful business person and then you donate to a good cause. Like, you can bring the two together, right? And so my mindset was really just, I didn't care. And honestly, to this day, the VR, which is what we're in today, virtual reality, it's kind of just the medium. Like, to me, what I'm more passionate about is the opportunity to bring change at a high level. And so I just started looking for, okay, where could we reform something? Where could we do good in a meaningful way and make money? And so we actually almost started a finance company. I won't go into all that, but it was just because we saw an opportunity to reform an area of finance and make money. And so I actually went back to Oklahoma. We've been out in California for a month or two, maybe. And I went back to Oklahoma and to raise money for that finance company. And while I was in Oklahoma, because I didn't know anybody in California, while I was in Oklahoma raising money, it had been a really good week actually of raising money. The last day I'm in town, one of my buddies who had been kind of like our digital media guy for the nonprofit, he said, hey, you got to come to my house and check out this VR headset. And I was 30 at the time. And so, I grew up, you could kind of, I got the Nintendo NES when I was like 6, right? So that was my trajectory. Like, video games my whole life. But in my 20s, I just didn't really I had kids, and so I had not kept up with where VR technology was. So I go to his house and I put on this VR headset, and I'm like, wow, this is awesome. Like this, you had to have a gaming PC, so it was a pretty expensive setup at the time. But the technology was so good. And my buddy said, there's already, we were doing some zombie shooter, and, it was a game, but he said that, there's already applications in healthcare and education that are pretty powerful. And so I remember I left his house and I was driving back to my in-laws where I was staying, and my mind is just racing because this whole finance thing was like, okay, it was honestly kind of boring, but it checked the boxes of like reform and make money. And so I was thinking, man, VR is new. It hasn't started. Like, this could be that thing that hasn't formed yet that's going to change the world. And my perspective had been, or was, and still is, that like if you operate with excellence, the doors will open. And so it was like, maybe we could get into this space somewhere, and if we do a good job, maybe we could, again, very idealistic, and maybe that's an ingredient. Maybe it's you got to be young and a little bit dumb and naive to have the idealistic vision. But it was like, maybe we could have a seat at the table helping shape this new technology, which is kind of the whole beginning of how we got into VR. But yeah, so we moved out. My wife didn't have a job. I didn't have a job. And this whole thing kind of just evolved. And I think what's cool about it is, again and again, you see, we've all seen this, but it's like when you're trying to figure out what to do next, you almost always have to be moving, right? It's like you can't steer a ship if the ship isn't moving. And so I was
Hmm.
moving in a direction that I thought was the right direction, although it felt a little weird. And on that path, something completely unexpected happened that has led to where we are today.
Yeah. So connect me from there to now Arbor exists and you guys are, have technology and working with a lot of different companies and that sort of thing. How'd you take that game changing moment where you experienced VR for the first time and
Yeah.
turn that into a company?
Well, I think that so going back to that, this was like almost 10 years ago. So it was like September of 2016. And you think about like when you look back and it's like there's the ingredients of success or some level of success that we've had, and there's the timing and there's the risk and there's all these pieces. But it was like I think part of it was our willingness to go into kind of a goofy space, which I'll share about, and just with the goal of like let's just go here and let's do it with excellence. And if that, then let's just take the next step and let's take the next step. So I'm leaving my buddy's house, driving back to my in-laws, and I call my friend who's now one of our co-founders and just said, hey, like this whole finance thing, like we could do that anytime. Like there's no timing on that, right? Like we could, but it feels like there's a moment here with VR. And I had just finished, this is always like a little bit of the embarrassing part of the story because I'm 30 at the time. My dad gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad, the book, probably when I was like 12, when he also gave me like my 6-pack cassettes of Dave Ramsey. Like he's like, listen to these and read this book and you'll be successful, right? Oh, I didn't read the book till I was 30. So I was like reading it at that point because I'd been unemployed for a month and I had time. And I had just read the chapter in the book where Robert Kiyosaki gets comic books for free from his local library. And then he charges his friends to come and read comic books in his basement. So I just read that, and then I just tried VR, and the VR setup was probably $3,000, and so I'm thinking, man, that was a lot of fun. I would pay to play that. Like, I bet if I had some of these rigs, like people would pay to just play games. So I call my buddy back and say, hey, I know this was like crazy or goofy. And I'm saying crazy. Crazy makes it sound like cool. It was goofy. Like, what if we opened up a virtual reality arcade? And he's like, I don't know. And he's like, wait, let's just think about it. Let's see. Like, this was September, October, and we knew nothing about VR. I knew nothing about VR. We knew nothing about retail. And so I said, okay, like if we're supposed to do this, we need like 3 things to happen really quickly. I think it was 3 things. Yeah, it was 3 things. We needed to raise a little bit of money for this goofy idea. We needed to find a location for an arcade, a virtual arcade. And then it had to happen, in my mind, before Black Friday, because the only logic I had in this was we have no idea what we're doing, but maybe Christmas traffic will save us.
Yeah.
And so within like 2 weeks, all that stuff happened, and we got there's like one main mall in Oklahoma City, and we didn't think about California. I knew nothing about California real estate, so we said, okay, we'll do Oklahoma City. There's an Apple store there that had been temporarily relocated that was moving out like Black Friday weekend. So we got this beautiful store, and we were able to launch. And so like that whole thing was like, let's just get in somewhere and do a good job. So we ended up launching one of the first virtual reality arcades in the country. And in the process of the 6 weeks of, well, what are we doing? You make a pro forma and then you raise money and then we buy all the equipment, and we're kind of running through our customer, like what the customer experience would be in the store. And we realized like, oh man, we're in trouble because we had forecast a couple of employees to run this thing, but the VR setup was so hands-on that we're thinking you're going to have an employee per every headset. There's like no way. And so our now third co-founder who was helping us, he was going to be kind of the boots on the ground operator. He found somebody in Europe to build a very early version of the software that we sell today. And the whole idea was some sort of software that would automate that user experience in the store, just so we could save money on overhead, which I think is cool too, because so it's like we start in the problem space, like the whole, I mean, you go back to like the actual origin of the software itself was us feeling the problem ourselves, right? And saying like, if we don't do this, we're going to fail the first month and so we had this really basic software built to basically manage, it's similar today. It's managing the user, the content, and the headset in the store. And we end up having a really good 6 weeks, holiday season. We learned that selling gift cards is like printing money, and nobody even redeems them. So you sell gift cards, right? But we came out of the holidays, and we've gotten some press. I mean, it was like one of the first, like I said, the first arcade in the country. We gotten some press, and so we're thinking, wow, what do we do now? And we're looking at all these different options, and like, how do we grow? How do we go change the world? That's kind of our mindset. And we start. This is like January. It's happened pretty quickly. It's like in January. We start doing a little research, and we're seeing that there's actually these other arcades popping up, VR arcades, in different parts of the world. And so we're like, well, we have this software. We would have failed the first month if we didn't have this. Like, what if we? So we start calling these other arcades, and they're like, yeah, I was actually going to build something. I'd love to buy the software. And so within the next 2 months, we had fully kind of pivoted into software, and even that was like, okay, our why to get into VR was not because we were VR enthusiasts. It was because we saw an opportunity to help shape a new technology. So the thought process was like, where can we have the biggest impact, the most reach? And in doing multiple brick and mortar arcades, or in selling our software to all the arcades, so it's a pretty easy decision, right?
Right.
And so, like one of the third co-founder, he put together all like lists of, so we hired a full-time person, like out of Bangladesh, and her full-time job, she still does work with us to this day, was to Google every city in the country, and then all these keywords to find arcades. And so we get this list, and then we would stay up 24/7 calling arcades around the world, trying to sell software to them. And so like it was probably a 2-year period of time, this little VR arcade market exploded. I use that very loosely, but like relative to the rest of the VR space.
Yeah.
And I think it was just a timing thing of the consumer VR market was not growing as people had expected. This goofy arcade market is growing. We happen to be there as the leader servicing most of the arcades in the world. And so it gave us this, like, talk about a dress rehearsal. I mean, it was such a great experience. That was a very hard customer base to serve, because it's literally like, Viv, you and me were like, I like VR. Do you like VR? Yeah, let's start an arcade. What's our business model? I don't know. So that's the people we're selling software to, right? Like, it's like the worst people. They have no clue what they're doing, right? And so, like to sell software globally to a customer base of enthusiasts who are trying to become business people, right? Like, it's this whole thing. But like along the journey, again, like that space started to get some like attention, and just because we were a big fish, or let's say like the biggest minnow in a very tiny pond, people would call us. And so like this sounds like I'm making this up. There was it was an 8 or 10 week period where once a week somebody from a major tech company reached out to us, and it was Sony, then it was Microsoft, then it was Nvidia, whoever, and it was like, hey, like, we think that this VR arcade space is stupid, but it seems like there's a lot of action. Like, what are you saying? And we would say, like, well, we kind of think it's stupid too, because we wanted to get beyond it, right? But this is what we're seeing. And it was like it happened 9 weeks in a row, and we're joking like, oh, I guess it's then the next week someone would call. And so that really kind of, I think, helped propel us to what we're doing now. And so actually going into 2020, and we can talk, I mean, if we want to talk about pain, we can talk about some of the things we had to survive in COVID. But right before COVID hit, it's like that January, we had just had our best year. We're growing like crazy. And it's a monthly revenue model. So it's like every month. It's just so fun. Bam, 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 bam. And it's a pretty quick sales cycle, unlike now in enterprise. And so we're thinking like, oh man, like this is the year. We had been approached by HP. And again, this goes back to being the most attractive minnow in this little pond. Right. HP had this whole initiative to launch an enterprise wireless headset. And they called us and said, hey, we've watched you guys. We want you to build all the software for this headset. And so you're thinking, holy cow, like this is our shot to make the pivot out of the entertainment, location-based entertainment, into something more meaningful at more scale. So all that's happening. And so we think like, the plan was, let's sell this entertainment part of the business that's growing like crazy. And then let's fully pivot into enterprise with this HP opportunity. And that's like January, February, and then was March, COVID hits. And anyways, that we can talk about that. But it was like, we should have died that year multiple times. We survived somehow. And then in 21, we were able to pivot into enterprise kind of on the back of this HP agreement,
so
which is
still
what
there.
launched us in today.
The HP
So
agreement lasted through COVID. Like you still ended up having it.
I mean, it was like, so what happened was like, March 1. So we're like everybody else, our entire customer base is location-based entertainment.
Mm.
So our entire customer base globally, their doors are shut down.
Right.
So we go from we got no revenue, right? And it's a monthly recurring model. So it's not like we had these annual upfront contracts like we do now where we could probably weather that. It's just the spigots turned off. And as a startup, and especially in that space, like we weren't venture worthy at that point. No, like we were still trying to prove anyone that had invested in us was an angel that said, okay, I believe in the leadership. And I believe that the leadership can take what they're doing in this niche market and do something bigger, right? But the no venture group is going to look at us. And so we're kind of in this like just survival mode because we're burning to grow and all this stuff. So then you go to zero revenue and it's like, okay, if we don't sell this by, first it was like July, like we're done. Then it's like we have to sell by August. Well, so we had a buyer lined up and they're just delaying and delaying because of COVID. And in the midst of that whole thing of selling to this other company, that company gets acquired by a public company. So now our exit to a large like VR company is now an exit potentially to a public company, which is a totally different process, right?
Way more complicated. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that's like in progress. At the same time, this HP agreement, number one, it was this massive, massive agreement, right? Like it's a white label licensing where I'm fighting to make sure we maintain IP ownership and all this whole thing. But then they're having supply chain issues. So their whole thing is delaying. So I have no revenue. I have nothing to even, founders are good at finding a way to raise money. But I'm like, I got nothing, right? Like, what am I raising money on? And so I just needed to get the HP contract signed. Because like, once I get that contract signed, now we have something really valuable to raise money against. And so, I mean, like, one of the darkest days of my life was Thanksgiving of that year. Because it was like, we actually got, remember, I told you we have to sell by like May, June. Now it's if we don't sell by August. Now we're to Thanksgiving.
November. Yeah.
Yeah. And every possible way to survive, as much leverage as we can, like everything is just leveraged. Like I'm like, we're dead if we don't, and I get a call right before Thanksgiving, that right before Thanksgiving break. And it was like from the company we were going to sell to. That was the other thing. It's like, we needed to get a little bit of cash from that to like not drown. And then we needed to get the HP thing signed and then raise money for the future. And they called me right before Thanksgiving and said, hey, you know what? We decided we're not going to buy you guys. So I'm just like, oh, we're done. Like, okay, I risked everything. I don't know what's happening with the HP deal. And the long story short is that a week or two later, they changed their mind and they said, we do want to do it. So a no went to a yes. And interesting, it's always kind of like, why? Part of the why, and something that we've learned, I think it's really, really hard to navigate this in life, but especially in entrepreneurship, is that the question is like, how transparent should you be? And because you don't want to be dishonest, but I think there's wisdom and you don't want to reveal all your cards, right? And so that's like a very fine line to walk with integrity, but to be strategic, right?
Right.
And so I think what we finally found out or realized was that through this whole process, the company we're trying to sell to is like, why do you want to sell this? Like, if it's as good as you're, saying it is, like, why? I think there was this doubt in the back of their mind.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until we were honest. It was a very vulnerable moment for me. And it was actually one of my co-founders like, hey man, I just feel like you need to be honest with them. And like the true why was like, we need money or we're going to die. And we have this other opportunity. And so it was like, once we were transparent about that, they're like, oh, okay. Like that makes sense. Yeah. And that's kind of what unlocked it. And there was still some like, I mean, it came down to like so this last part of this, because this is just how crazy this was. I think, we might have ended up getting the HP agreement signed like in December. I think it was in December. So we get down, it's in December. We're trying to get this thing sold. And it's not even a lot of money. Like it's just enough to like pay the bills and the debts to get us to the next thing, right? And now we're negotiating kind of through this public company. And they said, okay, everything looks good. But the one issue is the CEO of this public company And this is funny too, right? This is just such a good learning experience. And we see this now with every enterprise. I mean, we have some of the biggest customers in the world, Amazon, Walmart, et cetera. Every contract with one of those companies has some really weird, unique thing. And you're kind of like, why is this here? And there's just some wound in their past that they're like, that's never going to happen again. So we have this in our contract, right? So that's what happened with this public group, is that we're to the end of it. And the CEO, at some point in his history, he had done a very similar deal. It was, and this wasn't even a true exit. This was an asset sale. So he's not, they're not purchasing any of our liabilities. They're purchasing just the asset. So in every way, legally, they're protected, right? Like they get the asset and they get to leave. But he had done this once in his past, and then the company he purchased the asset for went bankrupt or went out of business, and then somehow he got drugged back into it, which shouldn't have happened if it was papered right. So he has this wound. So he's like, look, we want to do the deal. But the only way that I will do the deal is if you can prove to me that you're solvent. And I'm like, that's the one thing I cannot prove. I am not solvent, right? There's no way to prove that part. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what do we do? What do we do? And the whole issue was that we had this HP agreement, but it had all this NDA around it because they were launching a device they didn't want anybody to know about. And so we couldn't show them the HP agreement. And we had worked so hard to carve out okay, we can show the HP agreement to investor, but like we couldn't show it to them. And so what we came down to was we could do like an attorney to attorney thing. Or it was like we could talk to their attorney. So if we could convince the public company's attorney, who was a German guy, greatest attorney on his Christmas break, that we were going to be solvent, then we were okay. And he couldn't go tell the CEO what we were going to show him. So we had to convince him enough. We could talk to him about the HP agreement, and then he'd be confident enough to just go to the CEO and say, yes, I feel good about this. And so the meeting happens. It's Christmas. We hear nothing for 2 or 3 weeks. We're like, I don't know. Did the German attorney, did we convince this guy who had no expression on a call? And then first week of January, I get a call from my contact, and he's like, hey, I don't know what you guys told him, but he said he wants to do the deal, and whatever you told him, he's excited enough, he'd be interested in investing in you guys in this new venture.
Oh, wow.
So anyways, that's a longer story. It's fun, but like that's what launched us into. So since the beginning of 2021, we have been focused specifically on enterprise. And we do, the most simple way to think about it is we do device management, content management, user management. So like this kind of management platform for companies and education. We have a lot of big universities and high schools as well, who are doing VR training. And we've seen, and we could talk about some use cases, but I mean, really the biggest companies in the world are moving significant portions of their training into VR. And we have a platform that supports that. And so it was like that period of time of like, kind of honestly, like stewarding something small and insignificant, and then overcoming a lot of adversity and surviving, and kind of we got some scars, right? That was able to propel us into what we're doing today.
Dude, it's amazing. Well, and holding out in belief and faith, like our product, our work matters. We're going to hang in there until the last possible second. And then suddenly it happens. And you're like,
yes.
Like game on. And you're ready to you get the HP agreement signed and you just go.
Right.
That's awesome. Did the, can you say, did the public company CEO actually invest?
No, they didn't. We didn't end up meeting it. And it was also like, it goes back to my like, for him to invest, we have to let him in deeper. And at this point, I'm like, I just want to like move. Let's go forward.
Yeah.
Because I think there was a payout on the deal, and I'm like, let's just move on, right? Yep. Like we're getting a payout. So we did not pursue that. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like once you get the sale, you leave. You just shut your mouth and leave.
Yeah. There's quite a few different lessons there as far as an entrepreneur, like building a company, and the importance of the story, the importance of the like conversations and the moments that you have, and as well as like holding on to the belief that your vision is powerful and you can make it happen. Man. A lot of things. Excited to hear a little bit about where you're at today. So, from that moment, where you're at today and some of the impact that you guys have seen. Catch us up a little bit.
Yeah. I think one of the cool, and I'll share some like specific use cases, because I think it'll help everyone kind of understand what we're talking about. But for me personally, like one of the coolest things that's happened over the last, I mean, it's been almost 10 years now, right? Almost since I first put on a headset. Now it's been less than that since we've been in the enterprise space. But the very beginning was me calling my buddy and with this idealistic vision of like, maybe we can have a seat at the table, right? And today, like what's so cool is that our team, and it's really our team, it's our team, is really known as like the expert when it comes to VR. So the fully immersed VR headset, or even AR, the glasses you can see through, in the enterprise space. Like so much so that, I mean, just the opportunities we get, it's our team is on the phone with Google on a regular basis as Google is updating Android for XR. Our team is on the phone with Qualcomm on a regular basis. We started several years ago now doing there's two big like trade shows each year. And we started doing a dinner at each of those trade shows where we were the host. And then we brought in Qualcomm. So Qualcomm's the company who puts the chips in all the headsets. Like they're the source of the river for everything XR. And they come as our guest of honor. And then we invite all these Fortune 500 companies. And it's like, again, I mean, it's like a literal, we're at the head of the table with the biggest companies in the world and having influence of how they think about and shape their XR program. So for me personally, like that's been the yes, this is amazing, right?
I was gonna say, it's the vision from more than 10 years ago. Like when you were looking at like, what are we gonna?
Well, and it's like, even as, it's always the question of like exit or where's this going? And obviously we want to have a great financial outcome and we owe that to everyone. And, that's the way, that's where this will go. But there's times when I'm like, man, the amount of work, the amount of pain, the amount of blood, sweat, and tears to get to the place we're at now, to have the level of influence we have in some of the biggest companies in the world, like I don't want to lose that. You know what I mean? It's obviously we'll make the right decision at the right time. But so I'll give just a couple of use cases because I think it'll really illustrate how people are thinking about VR in an enterprise setting. And we got to be part of a really cool article in the Wall Street Journal a couple years ago. And I think the title of it was something to the effect of like the quiet adoption of XR in enterprise. And I would say like that kind of in a sentence describes what's been happening. I think most people, probably your friends, if you said, what do you know about VR? It's like maybe their kid has a Quest headset, maybe, but nobody knows that Walmart has headsets in every store training people. Like, I mean, so it's like there's this huge kind of like no hype growth of VR in the enterprise space. And so, and I would argue, and I think maybe even my core why as it's evolved, because you start to say, I want to do good, I want to shape it. Like, okay, well, what does that mean? And I have a deep conviction that VR has fundamentally changed the way that people learn. And people are learning faster, like unequivocally. They're retaining more information. But I think the biggest thing to think about is that they have access to training or learning they wouldn't otherwise have. So a couple examples. So one of our customers is Delta Airlines. And one of their use cases is training people how to de-ice a plane. So I would like to say, like, think about, I mean, nobody ever thinks about de-icing a plane or training people to do that, right? But if you think about, like, traditionally, what ingredients would be necessary to train someone how to de-ice a plane? Well, you need a plane. You would need the hoses, the chemicals. You need a trainer. You would need the trainees. And then kind of like the key ingredient is that you would need snow or ice.
Right.
So it really limits, like that really limits your ability to train somebody, and not to mention the waste of chemicals and everything else. So by shifting that training, just that one specific training into VR, now let's go to the other end. Now, they're based in Atlanta. So now Delta could train 1,000 people a day in their living room in July when it's 105 degrees, right? So you think about and they can do it again and again and again and again and again, right? So it's
instead of having to fly everybody to North Dakota during the winter, and use all the chemicals as well. Yeah.
Right. And so you get to train again and again. If you make a mistake, there's no consequence, and the access to training. And then another really cool, and so you can start to think like, wow, I mean, we see this being used in every industry, from healthcare to nurse training. So nurses, getting time in clinic when you're training to be a nurse is difficult. It's expensive. You don't get a lot of time. Well, you can train as a nurse with a patient in VR 100 times in your living room. Like you can go and diagnose them. But another really cool one that I like to reference is to just show the economic impact, because yes, it's important to learn and train, but the reality is if there isn't some economic benefit here, this thing isn't going to go, right?
Right.
And you can you can kind of extrapolate. If I'm not flying people into North Dakota, I'm saying like there's money saved. But a very tangible example is Mars Wrigley. So Mars Wrigley did a 6-month pilot, and they chose one. So this is like the best pilot setup. If you go back to when we're in middle school and learning the scientific method, they did it perfectly, right? They just said we're going to have like one variable here, and so they went into one factory in 6 months, and they took one task, and it was the people who load the gum packing machine. So the extra gum, the little that's
Yeah,
I think that's more right. So, and they created a VR experience to train just those people. So after 6 months, they report on a podcast just like this. I think I think the people that were talking maybe were sharing more than they should have shared, but it was like the people from the manufacturing floor, and they said in 6 months, the time to proficiency decreased significantly. The waste, I think, went to almost zero. The output increased, and then the employee turnover decreased, which is something that's a big deal. And
right.
so their own words are the total of all of those improvements over a 6-month period at one factory on one specific skill set was like $19 million of savings. So it's like stuff like that. You're like, okay, this is the future.
Benefit.
Yes, and we're just seeing now, like every industry is moving pretty quickly into this. And I think in a lot of ways it's still early because you've got companies like a Walmart who's got headsets in every store. And then you've got Amazon kind of who's growing pretty rapidly, but not at that same scale. And then you've got someone like Walmart's direct competitors who's like just getting started, right? And they're all training the same people. And the only difference is like who started sooner. But we're seeing it in manufacturing. We're obviously seeing a bunch of airlines, endless use cases in that space, healthcare, et cetera.
Nice, dude. It's incredible. The question that I think fascinates most people is like, why aren't we talking about this? Like we're talking about this year, there's might be 2, 3, 4 trillion dollar IPOs.
Yes.
OpenAI, Anthropic, SpaceX, like all those kind of things. And everybody's talking about like AI boom and all the opportunity there. And VR just kind of disappeared, in a sense of like people aren't talking about it anymore. Why do you think that is? Because from talking to you, the industry is exploding. It's just behind the doors.
I mean, maybe just a question, and I don't mean this in a remotely snarky way, but I think about this a lot. But for you or anybody, it's like, how much have any of us ever thought about L&D, which is what this is, right? Like, does anything in the learning and development in any big companies get any kind of press? Like, no, right? Like, it's not sexy. It's not hype. Like, there's a lot of very, very big successful companies in the L&D space that I can't even name. You can't name, you know what I mean? Like, so I think,
right.
I think part of it is that it's like where it's getting traction is not sexy. I think part of it is that the consumer play for VR hasn't been as expected, right? So again, that's where the hype is at, and that's where you're like, oh, you can get millions and millions of users overnight. So I think those are the two big things. I think in some way, like obviously AI is just dwarfing everything. I mean, nothing else matters right now, and as we both know, there's a lot of other really valuable things still happening.
Right.
And then I think the other shift that's coming, and it's hard to know the timing on it, but I think, even with Meta's, some of their recent shifts, like obviously they've shifted really hardcore into AI. Meta, like everybody else, is laying people off. And by the way, just a side note, this is a new piece of information I thought was very interesting. So we all know that, yes, AI is increasing productivity. And so that is at some level why people are laying people off. But the other thing we know, and you know this as well as anybody, is that the metrics for how companies are judged because of AI have changed, right? So now you're judged on revenue per employee. So it doesn't even matter. It's like, I just got to cut people. I can go pay the people that are still here double, right? But it's the count, right? So there's weird stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then another really interesting thing that we've seen is I think for forever, it's been like the cardinal sin of a B2B SaaS company to get one-time revenue, right? It's like ARR or nothing. Well, now all of a sudden, because all these big companies are cutting their headcount, they're starving to pay one-time fees for setup and everything. So for the first time ever recently, we've heard from some of our investors, like, go after that one-time revenue. And we're like, if we mentioned that a quarter ago, you would have said like that's the worst idea, right? So there's all that. Just there's so much like smoke around AI right now that I think is it's just shading how we look at everything else. But what I was saying is like even Meta, their shift with XR. You know, if you think of XR as being AR and VR, it's into AI and then it's into AR, augmented reality, or the AI glasses.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the other thing is that I think VR has found its product market fit in training and learning.
Yeah.
And VR is immersive and it's episodic, right? Like you don't wear a VR headset all day. You're in there for 20 or 30 minutes to do your training, and you can do it every day, and it's really powerful. The AR glasses, it's going to be totally different. Like AR glasses, you will wear all day, right? It's a shift long thing, and it's guiding you throughout your day. And I think the big companies now see, okay, well, that's the thing. Like I can go sell more of those, and if there's AI attached to it, then I can have the tokens running. But I think what we're seeing already in some areas is that I think AR glasses in enterprise are going to be just as, well, probably more powerful than VR. It'll be a bit different use case.
Yeah.
But I think the vision that we see is that you've got, like, use Walmart as an example. You've got the two VR headsets in the training room. So you come in and you're the employee that day. So you go and you do your training. And then today you're going to work in the paint department. So you put down the VR headset, you pick up your AR or your AI glasses, you walk out to the paint department, and now you have guidance to say, okay, this is how this gets stocked, this is where this goes. Oh, and we can judge your productivity throughout the day, or we can
because
grade
they can see you at the
yes. So I think the whole thing becomes, and like the one I think important differentiator, and even as we think about how we differentiate ourselves, is that where we've really specialized is in shared devices. So again, if you think historically, like with a cell phone, like you don't share your cell phone. If you have a tablet, you don't share a tablet. If you share a laptop, you don't share your laptop. With XR in the enterprise space, these are shared devices, right? So like multiple people use the same VR headset, and our expectation is the same thing will be true, at least for the blue collar work, with AR glasses, right? So like you'll have a set of glasses that your truck drivers use, but they're not going to like take those home and use them at home. That's weird, right? Like so it's not like your cell phone, right? Like, so you may have a pair of glasses that's shared by 2 or 3 people because it's a shift long work versus episodic. So I think kind of all those factors, but the last thing I'll say on it is like, I think what's interesting in some ways, it's like, it allows us, like there's no target on our back at all because people are so focused on other things. And I think what makes me feel excited and confident is that anytime there's a new technology, and AI it is past this now, but I think in the early days, there's like this question mark of like, is there real value here? Right? Like, so we're chasing this thing with this expectation of like, it's going to be valuable. And I think AI was that way for a long time too. It was like, well, we think this is going to be something, so we better just dump lots of money into it. I think where VR has been now for the last few years is that, again, unequivocally, there is this intrinsic value that people learn, just the way that people learn has changed. And I think there's like a protection in that no matter what hypey things happen around it, it's just proven that if you train people in VR, the outcomes are exponentially better. And so I think that maybe it doesn't grow at the hyperbolic rate as an AI thing, but it's going to have this strong, steady growth based on real value.
Yeah, dude, I love it. That's awesome. That's really helpful, I think, for people, especially people who are investors in Eagle, but people who are thinking about this space, like how it looks, where it's going, that kind of thing. Yeah. I did want to ask, are y'all doing anything in the glasses space? Are y'all touching that?
Yeah, we are. Yes. Yes. And like I think
you've got
the next
amazing technology also, I mean, in the VR space, and you're in a well-known name in it. Seems like that could be an easy additional.
Yeah, so we support all the AR glasses. I will say to this point, the vast majority of our customers are using VR devices more than AR devices, but that's more of a function of the quality of the AR devices. I think this year AR is going to kind of have its moment. There's some new devices coming out that I think are good and devices that mainstream hasn't heard about. And then I think, you really need to think about like the Meta Ray-Bans as not an AR device, but more as like an AI glass. It's not really augmented reality. And I think there'll be a place for those as well. And we do have customers that are interested in those. So yeah, we support in anything. That's why we say XR, AR, VR, MR, even AI glasses. We work with all those.
Dude, that's really interesting. So you guys are still on the cutting edge of so many cool technologies coming out. So give me 10 years. We're coming to the end of our time.
Yes.
get, 5, 10 years from now, where do you think this space is going? Like all training everywhere is done in VR, and then like, that type of thing, or what's it look like?
Yeah, no, I think that the thing we have to consistently remind ourselves in our own company with our own investors is that although we have been in this space for 10 years, in so many ways, it's still so early. And like I said, I could give you a list of Fortune 5 or Fortune 10 companies that are using XR extensively. I could give you an equal list of who are just starting. And so I think
Interesting.
the real, yeah, it's like it's still early for a lot of companies. And so I think the real vision is that VR is never going to fully replace training. Like that just it's an augment. I think that's been a problem too. Is I think there was this idea that it's just fully going to replace. Like no, that doesn't. It's not going to fully replace it. But it's a really really powerful augment. And I think making sure that it's like if you go back to if you can think about like when web-based training first came out. So when people first started watching videos on the internet for training,
Right.
right? Like when that first happened, it was not connected to a company's learning management system. So it was this very at that point in time a very powerful new training medium, but it was siloed from the traditional training. So I think what happens, and it's not sexy, but I think it's powerful and it's meaningful over the next 10 years, is that every company in the world has a use case for VR. They understand what that use case is, and there's a really powerful spot that it fits in, and that it's not siloed, that it's integrated into the rest of their learning training cycle. But I think what I mentioned a minute ago is that you see AR come on in a really powerful way, and so that you got VR as this like episodic, immersive kind of training in time, moment in time, and then you pick up your AR glasses and you hop in your delivery truck and you're scanning things, or you hop out on the retail floor. I think that's the world that we see,
Yeah.
and it's our vision to be the platform that's powering all that.
All that too. Dude, very, very cool. Well, hey, if somebody's listened to the podcast today and they've thought, man, this Arbor company is doing something powerful, we want to step into it for the first time, solicit, please. How do people get in touch? What should they go read or learn or do in order to get connected?
Yeah, so we have a podcast as well. It's the XR Industry Leaders Podcast, and it's got some of the powerful stories like the Mars story, and so you can go look and see the different company we bring customers on. So those are kind of fun to get some sound bites on like actual use cases. And then LinkedIn, we're pretty active on LinkedIn. So yeah,
ArborXR.com.
that's right.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, hey, Brad, thanks so much for taking the time to be with me today. Love hearing the stories, hear where the industry is going, and just thinking about all the different places where these solutions are possible and they're being used now. Yeah, excited to see you guys grow over the next few years, man.
I appreciate it. It's been good being here, Vip.
All right. Thanks, bud. Have a great day.